Hi guys, welcome to the Revive Stronger podcast. It's me as always, Steve Hall, and today I have Mike Israetel back on the show quite quickly, I think, for what has been our previous kind of Q&As. We've had much time strung between them, but I know for a lot of people, these are some of the maybe only episodes they tune into, or at least their favorites. So I'm very happy to have Mike back on here first thing in the morning. So he's kind of, you have to give Mike the benefit of the doubt if he's not on point, but I know he will be anyway. So how is everything on your end, Mike? I know last time we kind of went straight into questions, but I know you're prepping, and from seeing some of your photos looking pretty freaky, especially kind of glutes from the rear and everything coming through. So it's really exciting actually to see that all coming together.
It is very exciting. I'm in my sort of last final phase. Like right now as we're recording this, it's mid to late October, and I am hopefully going to be in something like competitive shape in early December. And depending on how COVID and travel and all this other stuff works out, I should be competing then. And also depending on if I get lean or not, but I think that question is going to be answered in the affirmative. So I'm on my way down to pretty lean. Like a week ago, I did a test peak sort of situation. So I guess the real story is I carry a lot of body water when I prep, way more than most people thought, way more than I ever thought. And that has been sort of my Achilles heel for a very long time. And Jared and I actually have very easy, cheap access to a Dexa here in Las Vegas. And I was like, man, like Jared kept going. He's like, you're fucking lean. I know you're lean. Like you got ab veins like during certain times of the day. That just doesn't happen if you're like 11% body fat. It doesn't happen. So he took guesses at what my body fat was, and we went to go get Dexas together. And this was about 2 weeks ago. And I was at 6.9%. And he's like, see, and like the scan has like the fat is labeled in red. And shoot, the lady looked at the scan and she's like, you don't really have any fat. And I was like, holy shit. Okay. So that was what would be like 9 weeks out, 10 weeks out of shows. And I was like, God damn. And Jared's like, it's kind of ahead of schedule. And I'm like, okay. And I was feeling pretty fatigued. So I took a little bit, like a week, basically half a week of higher volume eating. Still all the cardio, still all the training, zero cheat foods, just a bit more clean food. Kind of reset a little bit, and I felt a lot better after that. And then we were like, fuck it, like might as well do a mock peak to see how I actually look if this body water comes off. So we did one of those, Broderick's Insight, and it worked pretty well. And there the pictures that we'll post on Instagram with like the glute detail and all this other stuff like, weird veins and stuff like nobody had ever seen on me, including myself. So I was like, oh wow, holy shit. So the test peak worked. So
awesome.
Now I'm in the very early stages of like basically 6 weeks of the hardest pushing of the entire prep. So to speak, it's just sitting in a deficit that's pretty large and just living. People say time to push. I don't know what I'm pushing. There's not a rock here for me to push. I just wake up and have training and then eat. And then it's just, I guess, permanent hunger and food cravings and relatively low energy. It's just the standard. So I just have to live through that for the next, what is now 5.5 weeks ish. And that's it. And I think that just based on the numbers, I kept very, very detailed track in the last 6 months of my calorie intake. You have to on special sport supplements because sometimes your appearance doesn't change because of body water like you think it should. And definitely your body weight is just a straight up garbage variable at that point. So I've done that really well. And during times of supplement stability, I've done various calories and noticed how much weight I'm losing, because when the supplements are stable for like more than a month, then the body weight actually does become reflective. So I did that, and I have a really, really good stuff nailed down about what my deficit should be to get XYZ amount of tissue loss. And now that's engaged. So just to clue people in on that, because I'm sure people are curious, my maintenance is at least 3,500 calories. And that's because I train with weights a lot, 10 times a week. I walk 12,000 steps a day. And I train jiu-jitsu and all the stuff. And I weigh 225 pounds in the middle of the day. So pretty standard. So 3,500 to 4,000 somewhere is my maintenance. Maybe depressed on a diet, it's 3,500. And I'm currently running 2,600 calories daily. and I feel every bit of it. You know, like how a 500 deficit feels? It's not that. It's more. So 2,600 calories is what I'm currently running, which is, sort of at least a pound per week of tissue, probably more like a pound and a half, if not more. And I'm currently just running that, and that will be what I run pretty much unchanged, because it's at the very limit of what I'm able to sleep with. Like, as soon as you can't sleep reliably, you just need more time with your diet, and a greater deficit is untenable, right? Like, it's kind of like training volume, where like as soon as you can't recover session to session, more volume isn't the answer. I think a lot of people think with a deficit, I just have to grind harder. Like, if it was all willpower and grinding, willpower I could just not eat. I can just straight up not eat, or just eat protein. I've done that before for weeks on end. And if all that worked, it would work, but it doesn't, because your training energy goes to shit. And all this other crazy stuff happens with body water. So it's not the best idea, but I have plenty of time. And I think that at that magnitude of deficit for a total of 6 weeks towards the last end of the diet, now, this is like starting somewhere in the high 6% body fat range, if the Dexa is to be believed on average. And I have glute striations. So like in pictures. So like, it's funny because I've never made the Dexa thing public until now. I guess I haven't made an Instagram post about it, because when I had the Dexa, I was still covered in body water, and it would have been funny. I'd probably still do this. I'll post the Dexa results and be like, post a picture around from that time. They'll be like, man, no way, it's wrong. And I'll post a picture in the next post of me who's trying to glutes and be like, this is 4 days later. What do you guys think about that? And they're like, whoa, people are always incredulous, and people like to talk shit. So it's, when you have glute striations from the rear, and you have your abs are covered in veins, and your shoulders and traps are covered in veins, you probably are 6.9%. You know what I mean? It's not really that's not really controversial. So from there, 6 weeks at a very large deficit, gee whiz, Steve, call me crazy, but that's got to have to result in something like 3% body fat. And muscle loss is like literally not a concern at all with special supplements. And then voila, like, I have to be in some kind of shape. And then hopefully if the show thing lines up, it'll line up, and I'll step on stage and not thoroughly embarrass myself. So there it is.
It's really cool actually to get kind of I think for myself and other people, they're following along, but to actually hear you talk through kind of a bit more detail of what's going on your end, it's nice to hear it. And actually, I was just thinking the Dexa scan saying almost under 7%, and that Dexa scans tend to overestimate, if anything, from what I've seen. So.
Oh, no. Oh, really? Is that for competitors and stuff?
I thought so, yeah. Because I know like Alberto did one or something when he was like shredded to the bone, and it was saying, I don't know, closer to 10% or something, when it was like, you're looking at him and you're like, it looks closer to 5. So
for sure,
I thought they overestimated it, if anything.
Yeah. So, I mean, our Dexa seem based on, so Jared had guessed his own body fat prior, and I'll leave that to him to disclose, but he was right on the money for both of us. So he definitely, now we had 2 friends that were much less muscular do the same Dexas a week later, and theirs looked to be an overestimate. Like, one of them has like mini veins riddling his entire body, and it had him at like 8%. And it was kind of like, man, 8%'s a lean dude with some veins and striations. But he was like at a point where he was pulling his shirt off. We were like, what the fuck is going on with your body? Something's wrong with you, right? So maybe, but the Dexa, I'll tell you this, it is all pointless, because what the Dexa really does very well is it gives you your body fat in increments of roughly 5%, right? So if you score between 5 and 10, and I'll say in the middle of the 5 and 10 range, was exactly where I was, I guess on the lower end of that, 6.9. So let's call it 7. If you score at 7%, you're not 11. You're not. And during various phases of my body water shit, I was looking like 11 plus. I was looking towards the end of the evening. I was weighing 230, tons of salt accumulation, tons of water accumulation under the skin. I was in some angles looking like I was in the 20% range. Like, I had full love handles and everything. But then again, I had like a snaking giant vein through the middle of my abs, which you just don't, like, there's like discordance there, where like Jared, as the guy that sort of my coach that looks at me and goes, I wonder, he's like, I'm like, there's one point the day before we got the Dexa, I was like almost straight up ready. I wasn't really ready to quit, but I was like, what the fuck am I doing bodybuilding? This is ridiculous. I look like I have a beer gut. I like fucking love handles. And I was like still covered with hair at the time. I hadn't shaved. And I was just like, what the fuck? And Jared's like, shut the fuck up, man. You're lean. I'm telling you, lean. It's tough to, like, when you don't look lean.
Yeah.
And you're imagine. Like, you could tell me I'm lean all the time, but yeah, maybe I'm not. So at the end of the day, the Dexa does do that thing where it gets you in that general range. So if you Dexa at 12%, look, you're not like in shooting distance of a show yet. Yeah, it absolutely depends on how you look. Because remember, bodybuilding it's purely visual. So if you have ab veins and glute striations, the Dexa Dexas you have 20, it doesn't fucking matter because the judge doesn't look at your Dexa when you step on stage. But it just as a general thing, your Dexa will probably line up somewhere in the mid-range of a 5%. So if you Dexa at 3%, nobody can tell you you're 8 weeks out of a show. Like, it's probably body water. Because if you're Dexing at 3%, at most, maybe you're 7 or 8 at most. And then, yeah, you're like, that's like what? I don't know, a month or two out of a show. How long can you diet for, right? So I think for that, it's really good. And honestly, for most competitors, and a lot of folks probably have follow-up question, which is address, should I get a Dexa? The answer is probably not for most people, unless you tend to carry a lot of body water, which you might. So it's kind of cool to get once, but like, it's not like I'm going to be getting Dexas all the time. Like I get them like once a year, maybe twice a year. But some people are like, well, should I get a Dexa every month? Because it's safe and it's cheap. It's not going to tell you every month anything you need to know that your appearance won't tell you. So at the end of the day, especially in competitive bodybuilding, most of the folks tuned into your show have at least some affiliation with like getting that lean. When you're that lean, you'll know you're that lean because you'll look that lean. Like instead of getting a Dexa, I could have just taken that picture that I took in our little magic mirror in Las Vegas, the one that like got like 10,000 likes or whatever on Instagram with Jared taking it over the top of me, where I'm just like covered in veins and separations. Like I could have just substituted that for like, okay, I'm close. Like it doesn't matter what the Dexa is. When you look like that, it's like, oh. And then the rear double bi with the glute detail, someone, it's funny afterwards, recently, it's social media is a funny thing. I had a video recently of me like doing rows shirtless. And it's like the lighting is like, pure washout lighting where it's like a yellow tint light and it washes everything out. And I have clear striations in my middle traps if you pay attention. But if you zoom out and just look at it, you're like, this is like a guy who's like at 15% fat, right? And this guy's like, hey man, so like videos or pictures are more accurate for body fat. And I'm like, I don't know. It sort of depends. I think pictures are like, the lighting is usually the picture you pick is better. So it's like that. So he's like, so videos then, right? So you really are like not that lean. And I was like, well, I don't know. It depends on how lean you think I am. And he's like, I think I walk around leaner than you. And I'm like laughing to myself, like, yeah, motherfucker, you walk around at 6%. Got it. No, you fucking don't. And there's a click to the guy's profile. No, he fucking doesn't. Okay. But it's just one of those things where, one of those videos and people are like, you can yourself be like, hey, 6.9 Dex is a fucking lie. It's probably like the highest end. It could be maybe 10%. But then it's really great to have picture evidence, even if you take pictures just for yourself, of like that picture of me in that gym with like detailing the glutes. Like, it doesn't matter what percent I am. I'm just not that far off.
Yeah.
Like, you know what I mean? And my glutes aren't like the first thing to come in or something. And the rest of me like looking pretty fucking decent. So it's kind of like, okay.
I can't actually, because obviously there's people listening who have been through a contest prep, and obviously I have, and you get into your head so much during a contest prep. And I think as like naturals, we hold on to some body water, but nowhere kind of to the degree that it sounds like you are, certainly. So to be in a position where you're like, oh, I need to increase food to see what I really look like. A lot of people will be like, no, but I'm holding on to, it's clear, like they feel like it's fat, they won't increase food. So they just constantly, they never really see their true self in a sense, and maybe
just
make
describe
it worse.
My first like 6 years of bodybuilding.
Yeah.
When those like terrible pictures of me at my first show,
right?
Like the absolutely atrocious ones, I was probably carrying 15 to 20 pounds of excess body.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
And
so
infuriating.
I was actually pretty lean.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, sure. And people like, people comment later and like, oh, like he just doesn't know how to control his appetite. Like that emotionally at times, at my rough times, it brings me to the point of nearly wanting to beat people up. Like if someone says that to me to my face, I'll be like, I have 10 times more willpower than you. You're a child. I've run harder diets than you for longer. You have no idea what you're saying. You're just saying things. And it's because it's painful because of how much I've starved.
Yeah.
And then I just accumulate more and more body water. And I'm like, huh. So what I should have done is just people like, they're going to ask, this is a good preview here. Once I, post my more final week pictures or how I eventually look, there's going to be hopefully if this all works out, I don't get injured today, but even still, it's already worked out. Cause like some of the pictures I posted are ridiculous. And a lot of people have been asking like, what changed? I should have met Broderick Chavez years ago, first of all. should have met Jared Feather years ago, and I should have attempted to control sodium and fluid intake years ago, and it didn't. And really, it's like doing the sports supplement thing without proper guidance and reading natty articles. I remember reading articles on T Nation and shit like water and sodium are your friend. And I'm like, okay, just like, don't restrict sodium. Bullshit. As a guy using sports supplements, if you don't restrict sodium, you may be one of the 50% of the people who will be a giant water balloon. And as soon as you start to control sodium, your body just like turns into whatever it is you thought it was. And you're like, huh, okay. It is, natural stuff like there's quite a few folks on the natural end that are quite comfortable speaking for enhanced prep, and that's another huge mistake. I know some natty coaches that'll say like, you don't need to peak. Like nobody needs to peak. You just show up in shape. I'm like, you're a fucking idiot. Like you have no idea how many drug guys have you peaked? Like, well, I haven't, but it's all the same. Oh, sweet. So you're just pretending. And when your own body is living proof of the opposite, it's painful, to some extent. It's all emotional bullshit. I just have to keep dieting and keep getting in better shape, and it'll all be good.
Yeah, I think it's like on the general level, a lot of the enhanced to natural stuff is very comparable to one another. But when you're trying to get a physique peaked, which is a ultra specific and individualized process for a lot of people anyway, yeah, I mean, it's got to make a difference. Because I've equally read kind of guys who are coaching enhanced people, and I'm looking at the kind of peaking protocol. I'm like, this doesn't seem right to me. But equally, It obviously could. It very well is for someone who is kind of on the enhanced side. It makes a lot of sense that there's just the extremes are way more extreme when you are playing with extreme things.
For sure. And a lot of times when you have industry near universals at the very top, they're probably not by accident. So like almost all the guys at the top have pretty meticulous peaking protocols, and some of them are more careful than others, but everyone controls all the main variables. And they wouldn't do that if, like, for natural guys, a lot of times it's just like have more sodium, keep your fluid coming in, eat a bit more carbohydrates, step on stage. Like that's as easy as that. Jared has turned like 30, 40 people pro naturally now. And that's what he does. And when you see that almost everyone at the top of the enhanced field, or even most of everyone not at the top, does some sort of peaking, it's probably not by accident. It's like and this is a little bit on topic, but there's some studies that are very interestingly funny designed to try to conclude. These studies are not trying to conclude this, but people have used them to conclude this, that growth hormone has no muscle building potential. It's funny because, we have an interview that's on YouTube with Matt Jansen, who's one of the best prep coaches in the world. I was like, what is the big difference between when guys want to take the shit to the next level? He's like, as much growth hormone as you can afford. And I'm like, okay, because people don't even say that about steroids. Like, as much testosterone as you can afford will just kill you or just make you like a giant water balloon. But I was like, really? He's like, yeah, I've had guys who've gone into that higher end of growth hormone, 12 to 16 IUs, which, by the way, just a replacement dose is like 1 to 2 IUs, just to put this in perspective. And he's like, I've had a guy gain 20 pounds of muscle in 1 year just from that one change. And it's like, people will say, like, they'll get PubMed article on actual AIDS patients who don't resistance train, and they'll see all the gains are just body water. It's not actual muscle. And they'll say growth hormone doesn't build muscle. And you're like, right on. So in the presence of insulin and androgens and resistance training, you're still comfortable making that statement. They're like, I'm just saying it. There was guys this is like really one last funny story. I think viewers will appreciate this. There's like a forum on Facebook, I'll leave it nameless, where there's lots of like just complete idiot bros who just abuse gear. And then actually a pretty large handful of pro bodybuilders, actual pros. And these guys got on this thread where they were like, is growth hormone worth it? And they were like, yeah, man, it just like carries body water for me. And it's a really expensive fat burner. I just like take more Clen and do more orals. And they asked, I don't want to speak. It's not, I don't know if it's a public forum, and I'm in it. I don't know if it's public, but very top pro guy who's currently winning shows. They're like, hey, like, right, this is true, right? And he's like, no. And they're like, they have tons of respect for the guy, right? Because he's like, he's the IFB pro. And these guys are like just guys who live in New Jersey who like lift really hard and take lots of drugs. And they're like, you like growth? He's like, growth is indispensable. It is not a cheap fat burner. It'll revolutionize your training. And if you don't think so, you're either not taking enough of it, not for long enough, or your growth is fake, which happens. Yeah. And they're like, it's just like this crickets atmosphere where they're like, huh. And like, you don't take like orals and stuff during mass phases. to get bigger? And he's like, no, I only take them during cutting phases. And they were like, it was always like their world was like shocked. They were like, oh, because they had like 18 comments of thread that was like, yeah, everyone was in agreement. All the bros are like, yeah, growth's fucking waste. It's stupid. And then the pro comes in and he's like, you guys are all completely wrong. And this guy has 30 pounds more muscle than everyone with like, 0% body fat or whatever. And they're just like, So it's easy, especially in the enhanced realm, to make statements that are just very short-sighted, and you can even cite literature to support them. But because the literature doesn't exist in the right kind of conditions, ecological validity is really shitty. Then it's like there's at least, I'll put it this way, there's at least one study that shows deadlifting at high volumes is no more fatiguing to the nervous system than squatting or benching.
Yeah.
Now, people have asked me what I thought about that study. I think it's comedy. It's actual comedy. Because you can feel free to try that if you like. I tried it. I've tried high frequency deadlifting, and so have lots of other people. It's a road littered with bodies, and deadlifting is just more fatiguing than squatting and benching. And it's not something I'm interested in debating. If someone's interested in debating that, I'm interested in I'm doing a program for 4 weeks, and then they're going to be like, yeah, take that back. As a matter of fact, I'm not even interested in doing that because I'm going to talk them out of it. I'll be like, don't deadlift 4 times a week. Don't do that. You may not recover from that ever. Like something may happen to you where you pull your shit in 50 different ways. So it's just funny. There's this chasm there sometimes. And I used to have to bridge that chasm by myself, not knowing anything. Now that I have Broderick and Jared, it's much more helpful.
Hey, Pascal here. I just wanted to take the moment to talk about our membership site. Inside, you'll find a thriving forum, an extensive exercise library, courses, presentations, and research reviews. All I need you to do is hit the link in the description below and sign up. See you there.
No, I'm very glad, because I expect other people who have had similar experiences, but with other things, like, I don't know, they struggle dieting and they eat clean or whatever. And it's like, oh, calories.
Dude, if it fits your macro stuff, when people remember like the whole Snickers bar thing, and all due respect to Sohi, I think that proved a really good point that thermodynamics is king, that calories and macros are king. You can't have a Snickers bar every day through prep. But I think a lot of people ran with that further than Sohi was willing to run with it. And they're like, see, like this food quality bullshit doesn't matter. Yeah. And then you got people trying to do a diet and they're like, oh, I'm going to work in ice cream. And then it's like 12 p.m. and they can't fall asleep, or 12 a.m. and they're like, I should have never had that ice cream. I'm like 50 times hungrier. And then they go slowly work their way back to what the bros are doing, which is eating like tuna and white rice and fucking shitload of vegetables. And they're like, oh, that's why they do it. It's not some magical fat burning trick. It just makes you not nearly as hungry and more full. So it's one of those things where on paper at a first analysis, some things look really cool. People just run with them. And then when they actually experience them, they're like, like, I'm not saying the bros are right about everything. Far from it. I'm saying if a lot of the people at the top have been doing the same thing for decades, it requires a little bit of reverence. Just a consideration. It's like some people will say every now and again, one pro bodybuilder come out and be like, I don't like insulin. I think insulin is stupid. I don't think insulin puts on a lot of muscle, and I think it's a waste of time. Why does everybody use it? I mean, insulin's not even fun to use. First of all, it doesn't make you feel any specific way. Like some anabolics are like, it makes you feel like, oh yeah, like fucking get strong. Insulin makes you feel like bloated, and it makes you feel really hungry shortly thereafter. And it's really inconvenient because you can't even eat your favorite foods. You have to eat exactly what you planned really quick, and it's dangerous. People use that for a reason, and maybe it's misguided or maybe it's wrong, but it's not something you just write off. It's just strange when people are like, that's bullshit. It's like, is it?
Yeah, I think it's the way it comes back to the whole evidence-based practice is meant to be a combination of kind of the anecdote 100%. With the science, and something I have always respected you for, Mike, and actually it made me do this more, was kind of not jumping at one study. It's kind of like, when there's a lot of studies or like a lot of people doing something a similar way, like then we can start drawing some conclusions maybe. Before that, 100%. No.
100%. Yep.
Cool. Thank you for the update. I think people will appreciate that, and it will be interesting for them. So I'm excited to see, kind of less than 2 months down the line before Christmas.
Yeah,
an early Christmas present for everyone.
Sure. Something like that.
Cool. So let's dig into the questions. The first one is from Brett Freeman, and he has asked, and I think you may have covered this before, but I just thought I'd ask to see if there's any any different considerations, and maybe people haven't heard it. So he asked, what are Mike's thoughts on consistently working with lower RARs with isolation movements such as biceps curls, for example? Is it really much more fatiguing than consistently working with less than 2 RAR on these exercises?
Smaller muscle groups and isolation exercises do not have as much systemic fatigue spillover. So you can work with lower RIRs than you typically would with compounds without paying as much of a systemic fatigue price. That is a true statement. That is only part of the story. There are at least two other things we have to consider. One, what is the local fatigue that is incurred to that muscle and its motor nerve and its patterning in the brain, which is all local to that muscle? Probably pretty high. So question there is that fatigue worth it? That dovetails exactly into question number two, is why? I'll play the devil's advocate really quick. Angel's advocate, I don't even know if there's such a thing. Steel manning the argument is like, yeah, like it's effective to train with close to failure. It's less unequivocal, like it's more unequivocal, less equivocal. That is, it's like when you're close to failure, you really know, and it's not guessing. That there's a very low chance you're not training hard enough, right? And if the systemic fatigue spillover is not that great, then you might as well risk it. Right? So it's okay to go close to failure in isolations and small muscles. But on the other hand, not straw manning is the opposite of steel manning, I guess. But devil's advocate is, if all the research that we have so far, at least most of it, all of the research we have so far, and most of the insight from people at the gym who train, is that we don't actually need to go really close to failure all the time, especially at the beginning of mesos. Like, if you say to me, look, 1 rep in reserve is categorically better than 2 reps in reserve as a method of average training, you're making a statement that you probably can't support either experientially or certainly not empirically. So why are we doing it? You know what I mean? It's like getting a supersized burrito when you're not that hungry. But it's only 25 more cents. I'm like, I got you, totally. It's cheap. Do you need a bigger burrito? Like, oh, there's no way I'm going to finish it. So why are you getting it? Right? Like, whoa, but it's 25 cents, right? So like, just because you can get away with something doesn't mean it's a good idea to do. It's like a road with, you go out of the Autobahn in Germany. There's no speed limit in various parts. So how fast do you go? Well, if it's to the point where your steering wheel's doing this and you're like, I'm going to die, what are you doing? Yeah, you're allowed to go faster, but it's a really good idea. So you will pay other costs. And so people, a lot of times, and this is a real sort of devil's advocate position. People say, okay, the systemic fatigue spillover by going close to failure with isolations and small muscle groups is not as high. Thus, I'm going to do it. And it's like, okay, I believe the correct answer is thus you can do it. But the real question is, first, should you do it? And second, is it the best choice, all things being equal? I swear to God, and this is something in 10 years and 15 years, you and I are still going to be doing interviews, talk about the same fucking thing. A lot of bodybuilders, not all, are moths to the light with failure. Moths to the fucking light. They just want to go to failure. And like Broderick has a much better approach to this psychologically, where he's like, fuck it, go to failure. And he tells guys that consult, like, is it a good idea? He's like, no, but do it. You know, you live once, you got to feed the soul. I don't have that position. Steve, people aren't tuning in to us about the soul. That's what like meditation podcasts are for. They're tuning in for optimum results, at least a semblance of them. And then if they want to deviate from that optimum path by going to failure too much, sweet. But then it's a known trade-off. So when people say, should I be going closer to failure or isolations? My first question is why? And usually that leaves like cricket sounds. They're like, well, you can. I'm like, oh, sweet. Like you can also like cut off the tip of your pinky and probably suffer almost no ill consequences from it. You're like, right. So should you do it? Like, no, because it's got no benefits and small costs. I see. So let's go back to the failure with small exercises. Now, if somebody can show me convincingly, and I'm open to this idea, that on small muscle group exercises, going closer to failure is a good idea, is a better idea, then I'm absolutely open to the possibility. And remember that there is some very limited research that you get better high-end motor unit recruitment even further from failure on compound exercises than you do on isolations. That research is not what I would call conclusive, first of all. And second of all, what it shows is that anything between 3 and 0 RIR is pretty much maximum for isolations. And like something like 5 to 0 RIR is maximum for compounds. So it's not even saying like, it's not even saying like you should go to 1 RIR. It's saying like still 3 to 0. It's still the same normal range. So that the research discovery there wasn't that isolations benefit more from closer proximity to failure. The research discovery was that compounds you may take even further than failure than we thought and still get maximum motor unit improvement. So that's just the thing, man. It's just the thing. And when Jared, if you have Jared on again, he could go on a big rant about this. Jared has got a pet project of refuting failure people, and he's collected like a series of YouTube videos. I think he might have made a video about this on his Instagram. He did.
There is one.
Yeah, where he's like, quote, all the top guys go to failure. He's like, show me where. There's all videos of top guys stopping like 5 RIR, maybe. And these are work sets. And like, that was a hard set. It was like, these guys go to failure. Flex Wheeler may have never gone to failure once in his entire life. Like Kevin Levrone, all these other guys, like all the best guys from the 90s, tons of the guys today. Jay Cutler literally said on Fuad Abiyad's channel, he's never gone to failure. He's like, they're like, how often do you train to failure? He's like, never. He's like, maybe like once or twice in my career, like for a set or two, but that was it. Like, so you just don't go to failure. He's like, no, like it's pointless. And like Jay Cutler tells you that. And Fuad's a tough guy. Like he's a fucking like workhorse kind of guy. He didn't want to hear that, but he's an honest dude. So he's like, oh, well, respect, but like a lot of guys want to hear that. Like, yeah, fucking grind, mate. That's what it takes. Like fucking suffer. Like, no, it's just if you don't go to failure, you just have to do more sets to get probably the same amount of stimulus. And that may be safer, and it might take you as much time because your rest breaks can be shorter because you're like, once you go to failure, you need a big ass rest break for the next set. If you go 2 RIR, you might need a smaller rest break. So instead of doing 3 sets, you do 4, but they're 2 RIR, and the rest time is 2 minutes instead of 3 minutes, and all of a sudden it's literally the same amount of time, and probably lower injury risk, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I used to train for years, multiple sets to failure, every set to failure. I did super hit, like multiple sets to failure, and it was fine. It worked fine. And then I stopped going to failure, and it just worked better. My mesocycles could be longer. I got stronger within the mesocycle, stronger between the mesos. I got hurt less. My technique was better. Everything was better. I'm inclined to believe that that's probably the right answer. I think every now and again going to failure has some good merit, but consistently going closer to failure, again, moths to light piece. Oh, I can go to failure here. Why? I never really get a good answer.
Yeah, I think I'm glad you've covered that again, although it was a similar answer to you given before, but it's a nice reminder for people, because I think we bring this up regularly, and I end up talking to Pascal about it on the podcast regularly, and it is one of the moths to light is a great description of it, because it's just like one of those things. It's like, I don't know, a little bit of an addiction. They need a little bit of a taste of failure training, and I guess
it's fun.
If you're going to do it on something, isolation lifts probably are the ones to do it on, not the compound lifts at the start of the mesocycle.
That's a very good way to put it. Mm-hmm. Very good way to put it.
Like you said there, I think most people listening to this podcast are after optimal. I think probably even the people who are moths to light are after optimal and somehow tend to convince themselves otherwise of that. And I think that is kind of cherry picking, maybe anecdote more than actual studies, because like you've said, the studies are pretty convincing now. So maybe there'll be new science to say otherwise, but at the moment, like you said, it's becoming pretty compelling that we don't need to, and actually we can get better results staying further away. Not to say that failure doesn't have merit, like you already mentioned.
Maybe for advanced folks, it has more merit. But again, that's a big maybe.
Yeah. And I mean, seeing you, Jared, Charlie, pretty damn advanced, growing very well.
Almost every other bodybuilder, by the way.
Yeah.
Like, you can be sure that the guys that don't yell about failure all the time probably aren't going to failure. Like, they're just not. And they're leaving a couple reps in the tank, and they're fucking enormous.
Cool. We get to the next question. Actually, might be similar. I'm not sure. It was from Mohammed Magab, and he has asked, is there any scientific evidence to support benefits from going all out in some sets, maintaining proper technique, but with shorter range of motion? I've noticed that since I've started incorporating some of these sets in my training, I've seen better strength progress.
I think for people that have been underdoing the difficulty of their training or underdoing the volume, training harder is better. So for example, what Muhammad could have done is multiplied the total number of sets he does per week in that muscle group by like 1.3. And he could have gotten better progress. When you're doing X number of sets lower than your MRV and lower than your meso average MAV, right? You're just under training. Any increase in difficulty is going to result in betterment, not necessarily because of that increase in difficulty. For example, if you have someone who's under eating like crazy and you give them an extra 50 grams of fat per day, their energy in training is going to go fucking crazy. And they're going to be like, oh my God, fats, like what is the pathway by which fats give me energy? They just displace everything else you're burning, leave you with more glycogen which your body's kind of currently burning to fucking survive. So the fats don't actually go to the energy directly. It's a displacement process. So when you're underdoing it, more than anything works. When you're going really close to failure at the correct volumes, the fatigue is excessive and strength progress declines. When you're doing partial range of motions, this has been tested many times, strength is enhanced much more when you're doing more full range of motions, the direct study. So there's any direct studies to support this? Absolutely not. But we could do you one better and not say you're experiencing something weird. You may be experiencing something totally normal. Well, if you were going X amount of hard per week on average, and your abilities were X plus something, and now you've closed that gap in some way. Did you close it in the best way possible? Probably not. Just do more full range of motion sets. Probably get you well on your way, even better. But is it good that you're doing more of something? Yes. So that would be my first guess as to what's going on. And of course, these are very mysterious things. Tons of things could be going on. He could be doing less volume now. It turns out he was doing too much. And now that he's incorporated this tactic, but it makes him tired, he backed off with it. It improved. Eventually on YouTube, years from now, because got all scoped out, we'll have a video series on how to conclude and how not to conclude what's going on based on your own experience. It's very, very complicated, philosophically, very, very deep stuff. It's wildly complex. A lot of times the key is to understand that whatever manipulation you made may not be the direct thing that's causing changes. And everything else has to be stagnant as well. And the right conditions have to be there. So for example, it's a really good one. People will say, I increased my volume, but I got worse results. So MRV is bullshit. I got you. Did you increase how much food you were eating? No. What the fuck are you doing? How do you expect to get good results if you're increasing the amount of throughput and muscle damage and stimulus magnitude, but you're not supplying those pathways with the nutrients they need? It's like saying I got a really cool engine upgrade in my car, but I'm still putting the regular fuel into it. Like, it doesn't go any faster. Like, what's that supposed to? It needs special fuel. So a lot of times people will make one change and think, oh, okay, this is what caused it. Whereas in reality, it's 50 different other things, or they'll change their frequency or something like that. They'll say, when I squatted a lot, my legs grew the best. But they don't realize that when they squatted a lot, they were doing like a Russian program, which was squatting 4 times a week. Now that they're not squatting a lot, they're doing leg presses, leg extensions. They're only training legs once a week. They sort of forgot that it was actually a 4 versus 1 time a week comparison, which is way more important than any exercise you can choose. So you got to be really, really careful about these things. On paper, on the pure theory, and on the experimental evidence directly, Muhammad's case is one in which I would expect his results to be worse, not better. But there's 50 different ways in which they could be better indirectly. So, and one of them I described is just he's doing more, which is good because that's probably what he needed to do. There may be better ways to do more. It's like another weird one is like you're on a hypocaloric diet. You're not gaining because you're isocaloric, right? You add strawberries, okay, and it puts you into that hyper just barely. A lot of strawberries. And you're like, dude, the reason I started gaining was fucking strawberries. And it's like, yeah, actually, that's the least efficient way you could have added calories. If you just added 2 protein bars a day, you would have gained just as fast, except with 50 times less GI distress and chewing. And they're like, oh, Fox, it was the extra calories. Like, yes, it was the extra calories.
Hi guys, Steve here. Just wanted to take a moment of your time to remind you of our online coaching service. At Revive Stronger, we pride ourselves on providing personalized service that will take your physique and knowledge to the next level. If you're interested, check the description and sign up.
Yeah, I think that's very well said because it's counter to what you'd expect. Better results from doing something that you wouldn't expect to lead to better results. It's kind of, if someone's in a fat loss phase, just something that always comes to my mind, and they're very stressed out. And so they end up drinking and having like a tasty meal out. They super relax the next day. They're a bit dehydrated, lose some body water, and they're lighter. And they're like, alcohol and fast food is the way to go. And it's like, no.
That's just body water bullshit. Exactly. Yeah.
Cool. So we get to the next question, which is from Andrew Pottercheck. And he has asked, not that I agree with bro splits or 1 per week body part sessions, but could it sometimes be beneficial as enhance getting so strong it's needed just to give the joints that time between sessions? Or I guess you'll say do less each session, haha, but this still 6 days off for joints would be beneficial, would it not? Just a thought.
Yeah, totally. No, it's completely correct. Even for the muscles, when you get big enough. I mean, I always bring this up. It's just a good example. There's videos of Marcus Rule back in the day Smith machine pressing 5 plates, full range of motion in the incline for a set of like 6. And he did multiple sets of chest in that workout with machines and then incline press and everything. How long do you think it takes in muscles to recover from that? Guys will say like, yeah, you got to be training 4 times a week, chest. Oh yeah. Yeah. Walk in Monday, do that. And then walk in Wednesday and have pecs that are still attached to the tendon. Fuck out of my face. Right. So it's muscle, it's nervous system, it's cytokine release, systemic fatigue, and it's joints. And joints oftentimes for the long term are the limiting factor. So it's absolutely true that folks that are bigger and stronger, forget enhanced or not enhanced, may benefit from more sustainable frequencies that are lower. That being said, there may be a better way to do it. So a lot of people, and again, this is one of those examples from sort of Muhammad's case of nonlinear thinking here. People usually treat training as this kind of atomized unit of when I train, I do the following. I train heavy, I train hard, I do this, I do that. For people, they usually think training is one thing and it meets certain requirements. Like a meal has protein, it has veggies, it has some carbs, it has some fats. There are different kinds of meals, though, that don't have to meet all those criteria. Just the same way training can be different than what most people think. So if training to you means you go hard and heavy and you do the compounds, then yes, you may only be able to train once a week if you get sufficiently big and strong. But you may be able to train twice a week if you hypothesize training could be that hard and heavy, and you do that the first session, Monday, and then Thursday you come in and you do only machine work, isolation work, and you go sets of 20 to 30. Still a fucking great workout, especially for guys that are enhanced and big. Those kinds of rep ranges fuck you up. But they don't fuck the joints hardly at all. So now you're training twice a week, getting amazing gains, no problem for the joints. So the solution to the problem of joints and fatigue in general, precluding you from training at X frequency, can be to reduce the frequency greatly and conserve the kind of training you're doing. But another potential solution, which is probably better, is to think more open-mindedly about, okay, the joints are the problem here. How do I train but not hurt my joints much? And the answer can be, first of all, splitting up the volume a little bit. So instead of doing 10 sets of legs, you do 6 sets on Monday. And instead of trying to do 10 sets of legs again on Thursday, you do 8 sets on Thursday. But those Thursday 8 sets are very light, more isolation. And all of a sudden, you get 2 great stimuli per week instead of 1 maybe overdone stimulus that you have to sort of overreach and recover from for next week. So I think there are better ways around it. The problem is most lifters, again, moths to light, a lot of lifters, not only do they go to failure religiously, they go heavy religiously. They'll say, like, if I'm coming to the gym, it's either heavy or I don't show up. Word up. That's fucking stupid. That's the only way I can say that. You can get great training light. It's just not going to be the kind of training that builds a ton of muscle sustainably over time. That's not what you're using it for. It's like saying when I eat, it's only steak. Like, well, what about mashed potatoes? Like, well, you talking about a meal of mashed potatoes? No, it's on the side. So every week is a meal. Monday steak, Thursday's mashed potatoes. It's fine. It's better that way. Instead of like, well, I can't have 2 steaks, so I only eat Monday. Like, yeah, that's true. There's other things you can put on the plate. So I think it's maybe good to think about it like that. So yeah, to the question asker, there's absolutely validity there, but there are better ways around it probably than simply training with a super low frequency.
And when we're talking about light, I guess there's various ways you could make a session kind of lighter, exercise selection, I guess. I don't know, pre-fatiguing or also exercise kind of rep range. What would be, I guess, I could use
rep range first. Yeah, rep range first. So it depends on how light you need it to be to not bother the joints. So that's ecologically going to change lifter to lifter. Some lifters can, in fact, go heavy multiple times a week. Some lifters, their lighter needs to be like heavy as sets of 5 to 10 and lighter as sets of 10 to 20. For some lifters, it's sets of 20 to 30, and those are all effective rep ranges. The thing is like if your joints are beat up, sets of 20 to 30 and more isolation style movements, especially movements that are different than the movements you used, like if you did squats and leg presses for sets of 5 to 10, 10 to 12 on Monday, doing like walking lunges and leg extensions for quads for sets of 25 on average, it probably just not going to really hurt your knees because it's such a different application of force. The force vectors are different, the movement is different, and the absolute loading is tiny. Matter of fact, you could try this. You can do multiple sets with short rest, very close to failure of leg extensions, light, with myo-rep leg extensions. And then as soon as you're done on that, you get up and you just do walking lunges, staying really close to failure, and doing myo-reps for them for the next 60 steps or something. And that's a massive hit, huge quad disruption. But really, like, the leg extensions, first of all, just aren't that damn, are not transducing forces through the knee in the same pathway at all. And it's like 100 or 150 pounds. It's nothing. Your knees are going to be fine. They're going to be really warmed up. And then when you're doing lunges, your knees are super warmed up. And plus, it's just your fucking body weight. Like, I'll tell you this, if your knees are so fucked up that your body weight hurts you to lunge 3 days later after leg training, you may be doing something wrong in leg training. And then now I'll go back on the following. A lot of people don't know how to train. Their technique sucks so much that they're grinding away at their joints all the time. They just assume it's par for the course. I don't have hip problems. I don't have knee problems. I don't have shoulder problems, as evidenced by the super ROM laterals. I don't have elbow problems. I just don't have joint problems. Every now and again I do, mostly from jiu-jitsu. That's a pretty good excuse. But I can do sets and sets and sets of super high bar squats of hundreds of pounds and be fine because I know how to fucking lift properly. And a lot of people don't know how to lift weights. It's super fucked up. A lot of people who are really jacked don't really know how to lift weights. You'll see people deadlifting and bent rowing, and you're just like, what the fuck are you doing? Like, you would get laughed out of a powerlifting meet doing that deadlift. People would be like, oh, it's your first day or something? Like, no, I've been training for 10 years. Like, you're a fucking idiot. Like, cat backing deadlifts. You see bodybuilders do shit like that all the time. Like, yeah, man, I can't deadlift too much because of my back. Like, no, you're fucking retarded. Like, that's it. So a lot of times what people say is, I can't train heavy too often. Actually, you can if you knew how to lift weights. You've got Russian powerlifters 1.5 times stronger than any bodybuilder walking around who do heavy squatting 3 times a week. They know how to do technique. Shaco, a bunch of Shaco seminars that I've been to and stuff and have seen, they'll work with lifters that thought they were advanced, and they'll break down their entire squat technique. And because the Russians have no problem with being rude. They're like, you don't know how to squat. And the guy's like, but I'm a 600-pound squatter. They're like, yeah, because you're strong, you have big muscles, but you don't know how to squat. Let's teach you how to squat. And you look at the difference between Eastern European lifters and a lot of times Western lifters is from day one, their technique is fucking amazing because they get developed in junior programs. And every single lift looks the same. That's what a bunch of people say about Russian lifters is like, this guy's lift is, I've seen him in warm-up room, 135, looks, like 60 kilos, looks like 400 kilos. It's crazy. Like, that's what it's supposed to look like. But a lot of people don't invest in good technique, and they just get in there and pound the iron and go super close to failure, go super heavy, and all that compounds to them saying, well, I can only train XYZ. Like, yeah, if you train like that, yeah, surprised you could train once a week. But if you trained more properly with a full range of motion, pauses, positioning your body properly in a way that doesn't hurt your joints, then you would be in a position where it turns out you can train much more. More of the stimulus goes to the muscle, less to the joint.
This is, I see it all the time with the kind of chasing loads and training to failure, thinking kind of like the only way to build muscle is to get stronger, and kind of that sort of progressive overload in the short term. And that's kind of their focus. And that leads to breakdown of technique, and kind of they shift the tension away from the muscles and things like this. And I know I recently heard you speaking on, I think it was on RP Plus. Sorry, not RP Plus. It was a webinar with James. And you were speaking about, someone kind of asked, like, it looks like you're squatting, I think it was like less weight than you are now. You kind of explained the kind of internal focus and getting basically a better stimulus to fatigue ratio. And kind of people focus so much on the getting stronger, and I think actually potentially worse than that stimulus to fatigue ratio. And they feel like potentially, I can't get any stronger, and therefore now I can't grow. Whereas like you've taken it a very different path of, as you get more advanced, you can get better at that internal stimulus and keep growing with not having to necessarily use heavier weights all the time. Like eventually you will need to, but you're getting better at the technique and everything.
Quality first, muscle stimulus first, and the loads come as a result of that, and they're progressed into very easily. If it's all down to lifting as much weight as you can, especially if you're willing to shorten the range of motion, you're on a weird path. I'm going to leave this nameless. I don't like to talk shit. There's a bodybuilder who was just posted a little while back on social media, and he was like, there's a video of him rowing, and it was like this god awful thing that's like the seizure. And he's like, man, I can't wait to like start to really push the pace. Like with, it's clearly like he's going to be taking a shitload of gear really soon. He's like, I got that coming up in like a month, and I can't wait to push the pace and see some gnarly PRs. I just want to be like, PRs. How do you count a PR when your torso is swinging like 45 degrees? What the fuck are you doing? It's almost embarrassing. I looked at that like if I was like on a level with that guy where I could speak to him like man to man, He'd be like, what do you think? I'd be like, I think you're a fucking clown, dude. Are you fucking kidding me? And I would never say that because it's not a good way to convince someone. But if it's just like, if someone asked me, like, what do you think of this guy? I'd be like, what the fuck, dude? Like, what are you talking about PRs? Like, there's no standard here. And also, what is that lift even for? It's like some kind of deadlift bent row combination. Like, you can't wait to lift heavier. Why? Your back's not going to feel it anymore. You're just going to get hurt. Like, it's so fucking ridiculous. And there's that whole tough guy thing. And, we're all, the male side of the sport. It's funny, too, because if you notice the female side, females are just better at technique and they're not as ego-driven because females are not as ego-driven. And men will be like, yeah, man, I'm fucking tough. More pig iron, more weight, and blah, blah. Like, pat yourself on the back. You're a tough guy. People are afraid of you. You're the kind of guy that walks into a room and people clutch their purse. Congratulations. Like, is that going to be solace for you when you're in the hospital bed and they're like, well, you tore part of your glute off because you're an idiot and your bodybuilding career is over for the next 6 months? That's not going to help you much. And when you got to take more gear and load more weight on the bar and your waist starts to grow and your back isn't growing as much as you thought it would. And you're like, fuck, man, it's just not cut out for this. That's not going to be solace either. So train properly because you want the best results. And sometimes that means your ego won't look like you're training very hard. But good news, you'll be really, really jacked and really safe. And that's amazing because then you just get more training and get even more jacked and be even more safe. If you really want to talk shit to Dexter Jackson. And motherfuckers like retiring this year at age like 75 or some shit, looking amazing because Dexter Jackson was never an ego lifter. And like you could say like, well, this and that excuse, but there's a role model to look up to.
Very well said. Awesome. We get to the next question. And Evan Godby has asked, I've noticed many times enhanced pro bodybuilders do shorter contest preps than natural pro bodybuilders, such as 12 weeks versus 20 to 30. Are there specific reasons that this is the case or just coincidence?
I can't tell if the natural bodybuilding prep that we think is long is just an artifact of the fact that 3DMJ has influenced and coached tons of naturals and they're really big fans of long contest preps, or if natural bodybuilders on average actually prep longer for shows. I can't tell which one it is. Not sure. It could very well be that natural bodybuilders actually do prep for longer. I'll tell you this, Jared's guys prep for 20 weeks is like the most. 12 to 16 weeks for Jared's guys, which is as long as drug guys prep for. And I just don't know if it's true that outside of that circle of huge and well-deserved influence of 3DMJ that people are doing 40-week contest preps. So I don't know if that's true. I will say that if you are enhanced, you can do a shorter prep and just not risk muscle loss. I will also say that it is incredibly difficult because the amount of drug throughput and caloric throughput that is required tears you a new asshole psychologically, physiologically, everything. Like a lot changing really fast in your body, hunger signaling and everything going which way, one way or the other. It's tough. And most bodybuilders who have competed in the enhanced level for a while will tell you like short preps are stupid. Don't do them. Yes, I have gotten on stage after 8 weeks of dieting. It was awful, terrible. I'm super happy I didn't fuck on my peak, but my body water was doing all kinds of crazy shit. And I really, really liked just taking 12 weeks or 16 weeks or 20 weeks and so on and so on. So I think that the biggest obvious factor is that enhanced folks can do shorter preps and get away with it. But they can also do longer preps and get away with it because they don't accumulate diet fatigue the same way potentially. I will say another constraining factor is that prep a lot of times means you start taking really harsh compounds and orals in high doses, which you just can't do for very long because your body starts to die. So a lot of times the cycle is shortened that way based on just necessity of you just can't keep cranking. Because as a natural prep, shit, you can prep for 40 weeks and your body's fundamentally the same. You have low testosterone, things like that for a long time. But for at the pro level, at the enhanced level, same. It's one of those situations where, like once you start to turn it up, so to speak, that faucet doesn't stay turned on for long. Because if it does, your own body comes out of that faucet. So it's another thing where people, there may be like a lead in of a month where you start to take normal amounts of gear, and then another month where you start to introduce things like tren, and then you got 2 or 3 months where you start to do orals and fat burners and all this other crazy shit. And you can only do that for 2 or 3 months. So that automatically limits your prep to maybe 16 weeks. Right? So if you say, hey, is there a 24-week prep? part of that isn't really prep. It's probably mass gating. We're just recomping at like pretty normal doses and long-term sustainable compounds. So that's probably another reason where it's not just that they can do shorter if they need to, they also can't do longer if even that would be ideal for them. So maybe completely right that 3DMJs had it right all along. The 30, 40 week contest prep is absolutely the best way to go. But enhanced guys actually just can't do that because you just can't stay on a ton of gear that long. You can, not the best idea.
Yeah, I think it's very interesting that you say, I wonder if that is the case, because certainly from social media, I would say it does look like a lot of natural guys are doing the longer preps, but I mean, it might just be that we're just seeing that. I think Andrew Chappelle might have done a study, like a case study kind of study on kind of pro bodybuilders. I can't remember if he looked at kind of length of contest prep. He definitely looked at like rate of loss in terms of like body fat, rate of loss in terms of body weight loss per week, which is interesting. I wonder if from what I see, potentially in the natural scene at least, a lot of guys start kind of very like peak mass essentially is when they call that then start a prep. So maybe they're 30 pounds over stage weight or 40 even, which is why they need the length of time they need, because they've got so much to take off. Whereas I don't know if I know for you, and you introduced this to me, it's a case of like, if you're that far over, you want to diet some off, then come away from it and then go down again.
Which a lot of the 3MJ sort of influence would just actually call that one diet. And they might not be wrong. Like with the number of diet breaks they take, you could actually make an argument to say they never diet for longer than 6 weeks at a time. Their prep is only 6 weeks long. And then the pre-prep before that, before the diet break, is another 6 weeks, and so on and so forth. So with diet breaks, the whole equation changes. Pros usually don't take diet breaks because once you're on that amount of gear, you kind of like, there's a finish line and you kind of just fucking going. Like very few pros pull back to maintenance or pull back to a surplus multiple times during the prep. Like as soon as prep starts, the deficit is imposed. Usually the deficit doesn't change much, if at all. And then you just take incrementally more gear and the deficit is there. And all of a sudden, voila, you're in shape. So it's a more linear process, which again, to Evan's very good question, the answer may be, again, there's that linearity. For a lot of natural guys, they can't do that. They have to take maintenance breaks. They have to take diet breaks. And it's called 30 weeks is really not 30 weeks total. It's 20 weeks total with a bunch of diet breaks. And because of the diet breaks, it's not as imposing physiologically or psychologically as you would think. So, my God, 30 weeks straight of a deficit? And they go, actually, no, not even close. Like, oh, I see. There's a bunch of breaks. So little bit of a potential difference in how that's applied.
And do you think, Mike, for the pros that are enhanced, do you think they'd be better taking some maintenance periods here and there? The diet breaks?
If they need them, yes.
Right.
A lot of the guys who are enhanced start off at 10%-ish and run from 10% to stage conditioning probably requires 0 diet breaks. And taking a diet break when you're at 5% fat, as Jared has many times said, is probably a bad idea. You're just in a really shitty spot and you're just staying there longer. So I think diet breaks are absolutely great at the higher body fat ranges. So for example, if you start at 15% and you want to get to stage conditioning, then taking a diet break around 10% is a really good idea. That's breath of fresh air. But I think it's pretty clear to us, likely to us, that once you descend significantly below 10% body fat, it's kind of like getting really close to a fire and try to pick something out of the fire with like one of those mittens, like you don't take a break when you're close to the fire. You take a break before you enter the burning building. So like if you're a firefighter, you run up to a burning building, you take a break right before you enter. Once you enter the burning building, that's like so significantly sub 10% fat. Just get in and get that fucking thing out of the fire as quick as you can. There's no taking breaks during that within the building. That's not a good idea because you're so lean and so depleted and so on and so forth. Enhanced guys can make it happen more likely because all their hormones are exogenous and they don't have low testosterone in that position, but they have 50 other influences of diet fatigue that it's the question becomes, what is the purpose of a diet break? Psychologically it can help, but then again, like, look, if you start at 10%, and you're going on stage at somewhere between realistically like 3 to 4%, I mean, really, how long is that going to take? It's not going to take probably more than 12 weeks. And if it is, why are you dieting that slow? You know what I mean? So let's 7, you take 7% body fat, and let's say the person weighs 100 kilos. So 7 times roughly, it's 2.2 pounds. So that's 7 kilos, right? 7 kilos to get you, 7 kilos of fat to get you, if you weigh around 100 kilos, 7 kilos of fat to get you from 10% to 3%. That's roughly 15 pounds. Okay. If you take 12 weeks to do that, that's just over a pound a week of fat loss. Steve, that's just not that much, man. And for guys who are 100 kilos, that's like 0.5% of their body mass per week. I mean, like, that's fucking conservative. And for contest prep, I don't think that's conservative. I think that's right on. You know what I mean? The guys will say, like, oh no, you need more time. Like, do you really? Like, how slow are you losing? And then why? Like, at some point, losing slow, like the firefighter analogy, you don't run to the object you're trying to save from the fire because you might hit a fucking brick wall or hit some falling debris, but you also don't slowly walk to it because the fucking building's on fire. What are you doing? Like, you judiciously at a good pace move towards the object. Same way as once you dip below 10% body fat, yeah, lose like, something like a pound a week is good. And if you're losing at a pound a week you start at 10% body fat, gee whiz, because these guys, you don't lose muscle on an enhanced prep if you're doing things remotely properly, then really it's just a matter of you just don't need any longer than maybe about 12 weeks. And do you need a diet break for 12 consecutive weeks of dieting? Especially if you took one right before? No. And if these guys started 10%, that means they weren't a fucking huge diet break. They might have been in a mass gaining phase or a maintenance phase. And then they were 10%. And then, good God, of course you could do 12 weeks straight with no diet break. So the necessity of that sort of thing kind of tends to disappear. And I think that logic is pretty similar for naturals too.
Right.
So do you need a diet break going from 15% to 3%? Fuck yeah. Do you need a diet break going from 9% to 3%? I don't think so. Probably not.
Have you got time for if I dig into this a little bit?
Yeah,
or okay,
you bet,
it might not take long. I'm just getting a definition for a diet break, just so that people know, because I think maybe some people term them differently. I'm not sure, but I just want to get yours.
A return to maintenance for at least 1 week, if possible.
Okay. And just so then, my only question would be, obviously, if you're, I don't know, dieting that period of time, maybe it's 15 weeks or something, 10 weeks. If you had a deload, would you take that up to maintenance? Would that be counted as a diet break, or how would you approach that?
Enhanced or natural?
Go for both.
For natural, you would. So you would have an automatic diet break, but because it's a deload, intellectually, it's still a diet break, technically, but it's not like a pre-planned, like, I'm really going to back off here. It's just a deload and you eat at maintenance. You're not, I'll put you this way, a real diet break refills glycogen stores and stuff like that. When you eat at maintenance on a deload, you don't really refill glycogen stores. You just stop digging into them. So the fatigue is dropped, but there's no refilling process. And psychologically, it's not a ton more food or anything. So it's kind of still a diet. For enhanced, you can deload through a deficit just fine. If you're taking enough gear. Is that the best idea? Probably not. Would I like to see people ideally bump their food a little bit during maintenance? Yeah, sure. But they can get away without doing it. One of the reasons that deloading is not even a thing, like the practice of deloading weights is not a thing in the enhanced community, is because a lot of guys train in bouts of escalating gear. So what they'll do is they sort of don't train or train really easy and whatever. Then they start taking a lot of gear in a mass phase for, let's say, last 16 weeks. And it's more and more gear the entire time. And that allows you to have better fatigue tolerance the entire time. And it directly counteracts parts of cumulative fatigue. So you don't actually ever need to deload. Like, every now and then they feel tired, they take an extra day off, or they go light here and there, and that accomplishes everything they need to. Not a wise strategy, but it works, at least in the short term. It will get you injured sooner or later. And these guys do get injured sooner or later. And then in the cutting phase, they do the same thing, where they take more and more gear, and so they don't ever have to deload. When you tell enhanced guys that are really jacked, like, hey, do you deload? They're like, what's that? They don't even know what the term means. Like, well, like, intentionally, because you get tired. They're like, I don't get tired. Right. Like, people ask me, and a lot of people, it's a perfectly fine question. Like, they'll notice I'm cutting, and they'll ask me on Instagram. They're like, so, like, how much strength are you losing? The strongest I've ever been. But you've been dieting for like 12 weeks. Yes, the rules are a little different. So that way, a lot of times people don't even deload. Should they be? Yes. Should they be taking little mini diet breaks with their deload? Yes, but it doesn't have to be super extensive, as it might have to be more extensive in drug-free folks. But at the end of the day, I think once you descend below 10%, you had better have all your ducks in a row where you're not taking prolonged diet breaks down there, because first, you don't have to. because you're that close. It's like you just stop for gas 2 hours before reaching your final road trip destination. And then you're an hour away and someone in the road trip in the car is like, do you guys want to stop at this new gas station? It looks kind of cool. It's like, what the fuck are you talking about? We're going to be at the beach in an hour. Like, this is where we've been driving to for fucking day. What are you talking about? Why are we stopping? Right? You could stop, but like, why? And also you're killing beach time now, right? Like, you could be on the beach, but you're at this quirky gas station with like dinosaur exhibit. And you're like, what the fuck are we doing here? Right? So same idea. Like, once you start at like 10, 9%, it's just time to get it done. And then a lot of times guys will do another pretty wise thing where instead of taking diet breaks in the middle of that, they'll go from 9% to 3-ish%, get in contest shape, and then take a couple of weeks to eat a little bit more, really drop the diet fatigue. That does great things for your body water, great things for how you feel. And all of a sudden you look better. It works great for drug guys, works great for natural guys. So I would much rather see a little bit more on the back end there than in the middle, because you just don't need the middle. But that being said, if you're starting at 15% or 12% or 13%, yeah, you're going to need a diet break, maybe at anywhere between 8 and 10%, where it's still sustainable to be able to have one, because you need that extra breath. It's, like diving for jewels in a cave or something. You come up for air, or you see a big jewel really far down there. Yeah, you could get it, but you've been underwater for, 30 seconds. Come up for air and then go get it, right? Whereas if you just dive down and you see the jewel, just fucking go get it. There's no need to come back up.
Cool. Yeah, I think some of it's completely true. I know when I was consulting with Jared as I was going down and using some of the kind of, you call them diet breaks, but I was deloading under 10%, and it's a case of they're almost used as like practice peaks, or like you're not truly taking a break, you're not switching off by any means, you're not increasing food by loads, you're just getting an idea of how you're responding to a little bit more food whilst deloading. It gives you kind of an idea of how many carbs maybe you need and that sort of thing. So
and you can play with your body water and your salt and stuff like that to try to see.
Cool. Awesome. Mike, that is everything I've got for. Thank you for giving me an hour of your time. We're a little bit over. I know everyone would appreciate it a lot. I'm excited to do another one of these in future. And I think last time we I don't know if you got any more updates on the hypertrophy book, but I know last time we kind of like teased people with it. I don't know if you got any cemented dates. I know it's only been 2 weeks, so I doubt it.
No cemented dates, but December is happening with a 99% likelihood. So
awesome.
It's got to be happening. Yeah. Steve, by the way, the mustache works. I can't believe I'm saying that. Very few people can pull it off. You can pull it off.
I have a story about what's it called, Movember, and I did it at work. I won't talk about it here, but my mustache is I'm glad it's at least grown to this level, because it won't get much more. I appreciate it.
Well, this is more than sufficient.
Cheers, Mike, and thank you everyone for listening. We'll catch you soon. So I'm Steve Hall, founder of Revive Stronger and a coach of Revive Stronger.
My name is Pascal Flor. I'm the co-owner of Revive Stronger and also a coach, of course.
Revive Stronger has probably been going solidly for 3 years, roughly about 3 years.
Revive Stronger, to me, it is becoming kind of my child, my foster child. It's the gathering and getting together of like-minded people.
We've been expanding the coaching team, which is helping us help more people, but each coach can only help a certain number of people.
Right now, it's all over the place. We have YouTube, we have Facebook, we have Instagram, but there isn't that community aspect behind that.
And so the next step for us is developing a membership site.
So basically, we want to create a family and a community that is then benefiting from another.
A really cool community for people within our little niche is going to be a website.
They will get early access to our podcast.
You can access us, ask us questions.
The community aspect, we have a forum there. You can ask questions, but also you can log your journey.
There's also going to be courses on there.
Courses, presentations on different topics. Discount of past seminar footage. We will log our journey as well. We'll start vlogging.
We're going to have documentaries.
Our entire athletic journey. Furthermore, they get access to an exercise video library.
The exercises that we love for hypertrophy and maximizing hypertrophy, we're going to go through those in depth, telling you how to execute them.
We kept them concise and also mobile friendly so that you can watch them in between your sets.
I'm super excited to grow this community. The amount of value that we're going to be delivering is huge. And I'd love you to be part of it.
You will get so much out of that.
I'll see you inside.